Today's story is one of courage so dangerous it defied death itself, unfolding beneath the scorching skies of the Wild West. This was a place ruled by fear, prejudice, and gunfire, where one wrong step could erase a life without a trace. And it all started with a quiet act of mercy, a single choice that ignited a storm no one could outrun. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The Arizona territory unfurled endlessly beneath a sky burned copper by the late-day sun. Eliza Crowhurst narrowed her eyes against the glare. Her gloved hands clenched tight around the reins of her mule, the grip of someone who knew stopping was not an option. The wagon protested every mile. Wheels creaked and groaned, throwing up pale dust that coated everything in its path. Her washed thin blue dress, the canvas stretched over her few belongings, even the loose strands of auburn hair slipping free beneath her bonnet. It had been 3 days since she'd left Fort Buchanan behind. 3 days of nothing but thorny brush, cactus spines, and the quick flash of a road runner cutting across the trail. The folded letter tucked in her pocket promised work near Bisbee at the Copper Queen mine, scrubbing miners' clothes, patching torn shirts, maybe cooking if she proved useful. It wasn't much, but for a widow with no money and no place left to belong, it was hope. Eliza shifted on the hard wooden seat, suppressing a groan as pain flared through her back. The sun dipped lower, spilling long shadows across the desert like grasping fingers. She knew she should stop and make camp, yet something urged her forward. Maybe it was the station master's warning still echoing in her mind. Apache country, ma'am. Tensions are high since the army forced them onto reservations. A woman alone. He hadn't finished the thought. He hadn't needed to. The mule, stubborn, steady gravel, named more in grim humor than faith, suddenly halted. His ears twitched sharply, nostrils flaring as if the air itself carried danger. "Come on, Gravel," Eliza urged, snapping the reins lightly. "Just a little farther." The mule didn't move. Instead, he released a sharp, anxious bray that bounced off the canyon walls. And then she heard it, the drumming thunder of hooves. They came fast from the mesquite to her right. Eliza's heart slammed against her ribs as 3 riders burst into view, bandanas pulled high, rifle barrels catching the dying light. "Well now," the lead man drawled, his voice rough and amused. "What do we have here? A lady all by herself?" Eliza's mouth went dry. Her hand slid toward the old Navy Colt Calder Roan had once taught her to fire, but her fingers shook too badly to take hold. The riders circled the wagon like scavengers, laughter sharp and hungry. One of them dismounted, a man with pale, lifeless eyes, like a rattlesnake's, and stepped closer. "Easy now, miss. We're just looking for a little hospitality." His companion snickered. Eliza's skin crawled. "I don't have anything worth taking," she said, her voice barely carrying. "Oh, I reckon you do," the man replied, reaching for her arm. The rifle shot cracked through the air like lightning. The pale-eyed man reeled back with a cry, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped through his fingers. A second shot followed instantly, knocking another rider from his horse. The last man spun wildly, searching for the shooter. A figure stepped from behind a boulder, moving smooth and deliberate, like the land itself had shaped him. Long black hair was tied back with a strip of cloth, his clothes a blend of Apache and Mexican wear. A Winchester rested easily in his hands. "Leave," he said, quiet but unmistakable. The wounded man scrambled for his horse. "Filthy Apache," he spat, fear stripping the bravado from his voice. Moments later, The riders fled, leaving only dust and fading hoofbeats behind. Eliza sat frozen, unsure whether she'd been saved or merely passed into another danger. The Apache warrior approached slowly, his rifle lowered. In the dimming light, she saw his face clearly now. Young, maybe 30, sharp-boned, with eyes dark as amber stone. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His English carried an accent, but it was steady. Eliza shook her head, unable to trust her voice. He studied her, then glanced toward the sinking sun. "This is no place to stay. There is water and shelter 2 miles north. I will guide you." I don't... Her mother's warnings about Indians rang loudly in her ears. But night was falling, and the men might return. The Apaches seemed to sense her fear. "My name is Nayel," he said. "I served as a scout for the Blue Coats. I am not your enemy." Something in his tone, weariness perhaps, softened the tight knot in her chest. "Eliza Crowhurst," she said at last. "And thank you." Nayel nodded once and turned ahead of the wagon, moving with calm certainty as darkness gathered. Gravel followed at last. Eliza watched her unexpected savior closely. His clothes were carefully mended, and he wore boots instead of moccasins. A man caught between worlds, walking a line as unforgiving as the desert itself. They moved on, without exchanging a word. The wagon's slow creak marked every turn of the wheels, the sound drifting into the open land and mixing with the distant cry of a coyote. After a short while, no more than half an hour, Nayel eased off the trail and guided Eliza Crowhurst toward a small stand of cottonwoods gathered tightly around a spring. Clear water pushed up through the rocks, cold and clean, a rare mercy in a country that gave few. "You'll be safe here," he said, already turning away. "Wait," Eliza called before she could stop herself. "Where will you go?" He gestured toward the darkening horizon. "I know this land." "But those men could come back," she said, "and you're hurt. I saw blood on your shirt." Nayel glanced down at his side. A dark stain had spread beneath the fabric. "It's nothing." "It isn't," Eliza replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I'm not a doctor, but I know how to clean and bind a wound. Let me help." He hesitated, weighing distance against sense. At last, practicality won. He stepped into the faint circle of firelight she had managed to build and sat on a flat rock. Eliza gathered her few medical supplies and a pot of warmed water. When Nayel pulled off his shirt, she saw the bullet's path, a shallow furrow along his ribs, bleeding steadily but not deep. "You were lucky," she murmured, working with practiced care. Calder Roan had come home from more than one drunken fight, needing the same attention. "Lucky," Nayel echoed, an odd note in his voice. "Yes." As she cleaned and wrapped the wound, Eliza noticed other scars crossing his skin, some old and pale, others newer. Each one spoke of violence survived, of endurance in a world that seemed determined to break him. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Once, someone helped my sister when she traveled alone. She did not live. But the kindness still mattered." Eliza's hand stilled for a brief moment. "I'm sorry. It was many seasons ago," he said, though the pain in his voice told another story. When she finished, Nayel stood and pulled his shirt back on. "I will stand watch tonight. Sleep without fear." "You don't have to," she said. "I do," he answered gently. "They will remember my face." better I know where they are. Too tired to argue, Eliza climbed into the wagon and wrapped herself in her thin blanket. Through a tear in the canvas, she could see Nayel's dark outline against the stars, standing watch like something ancient. As sleep took her, she thought how strange it was that she felt safer with this Apache stranger than she had in months. Out here, civilization was little more than a fragile idea. People were just people, trying to survive another day. The desert breathed around them, wind through cottonwood leaves, insects singing. And somewhere in the darkness, a warrior guarded a widow's rest. They were both outcasts in a land that showed mercy to neither the weak nor the different. Morning light had barely crested the horizon when Eliza woke to find Nayel gone. Only the faint impressions in the sand where he had stood and a small handful of mesquite beans left by the water barrel proved he had been there at all. She touched them thoughtfully. Food for the road ahead, left without word or expectation. As she readied gravel for the day's travel, her thoughts drifted backward. 2 years earlier, she had woken to find Calderon cold beside her, his heart finally spent after years of whiskey and bitterness. The doctor had called it quick, even merciful. What followed had been anything but. Barren woman, Edith Crow had spat at the funeral. 7 years married and not a single child. The words cut deeper with time. What use were you now? The memories pressed in as Eliza guided the wagon toward Bisbee. Vance Hallowick, Calder's brother, circling like a buzzard, hinting at ways she might earn her keep that made her skin crawl. The family lawyer's calm voice explaining that the house, the savings, everything, belonged to the Roan Trust. Without children, she had no claim. She left with what she could carry, and the old wagon Calder had won in a card game. Pride kept her from begging, but pride did not fill an empty stomach or buy shelter on cold nights. By midday, Bisbee came into view. A scatter of wooden buildings and canvas tents clustered around the raw mouth of the copper mine. The air tasted of metal and sulfur. The streets teemed with dust-covered miners, merchants shouting their wares, gamblers and confidence men drawn to money like flies. Eliza stopped at the general store, clutching the letter from Tolliver Crane, the superintendent who had promised work. The clerk, a thin man with suspicious eyes, looked her over and shook his head. "Crane's dead," he said. "Cave-in 3 weeks back." Her heart sank. "Is there someone else I could speak to about work?" He laughed without kindness. "We've got plenty of women already fighting over the wash. Unless you're looking for work at the Crimson Bell." He nodded toward a garishly painted building down the street, where women in bright dresses lounged on the porch, watching the world pass by. "No," Eliza Crowhurst said at once. "No, thank you." She spent the rest of the day walking from one business to the next, each refusal cutting a little deeper into her resolve. The boarding houses turned her away. No rooms for a woman alone. The restaurant had already hired someone. Even the church doors closed in her face. The minister's wife explaining in a thin, careful voice that they could not encourage women of questionable standing. By the time evening settled in, Eliza found herself standing at the edge of town, blinking back tears. Her last coins had gone toward feed for gravel. By morning, she would be forced to choose. Sell the mule and the wagon, her final thread of independence, or lose everything. "You were seen with that Apache." Eliza spun around. A man in a dust-dark coat stood watching her. A sheriff's star pinned to his chest. His face was hard, the kind shaped by too many years of disappointment and suspicion. "Pardon me?" she said. "Early this morning," he went on, stepping closer, tobacco staining his gray mustache. Someone spotted an Apache near your wagon when you rode in. Sheriff Nolan Pryor narrowed his eyes. You know it's illegal to shelter hostiles. He saved my life, Eliza said, lifting her chin. Bandits attacked me on the road. So you say. Pryor's smile held no warmth. Funny how Apaches always seem to be nearby when trouble starts, almost like they're part of it. Heat rushed to her face. That's nonsense. He fought them off. He was wounded. Ma'am, Pryor cut in. I'll give you some advice. This is a respectable town. We don't tolerate Indian lovers here. Best you move along come morning. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy and walked away, leaving Eliza shaking with anger and fear. As if the day hadn't stripped her of enough, she camped outside town that night, too proud to beg, too broke to pay. She sat by a small fire and let out a bitter laugh. There she was, too barren for Edith Crow's world, too poor for Bisbee, now too stained by association with an Apache who had shown her nothing but decency. A sound beyond the firelight made her reach for Calderon's old pistol. Then a familiar figure stepped into view. Nayel moved with the same quiet, deliberate grace. You should not camp here, he said without ceremony. The men from yesterday are in town. They are speaking to others. They talk of a woman traveling with an Apache. Eliza's shoulders slumped. It doesn't matter. I have nowhere else to go. Nayel studied her, then lowered himself onto the ground across the fire, keeping a careful distance. You seek work. She nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. I'm a widow. My husband's family cast me out, said I was worth nothing without children, without land. I thought I could start again here, but... She gestured helplessly toward the town. Ah. The sound carried understanding. You are pushed to the edges, like me. You? Eliza asked. But you said you scouted for the army. His smile was sharp and bitter. I fought for the Bluecoats, helped them track my own people. They promised citizenship, respect. He pushed his hair back, revealing a long scar along his scalp. When the war ended, the soldiers I saved turned on me. Said an Apache is always an Apache. And your people? Eliza asked. They call me traitor. Say I carry the blood of our warriors. Nayel stirred the fire, sparks lifting into the night. I am neither Apache nor American. I am nothing. Silence settled between them. Two outcasts sharing the last warmth of a dying flame. At length, Eliza spoke again. How do you survive? I hunt, I guide when someone will hire me. I know places where a man can find gold, trade paths the Mexicans use. He paused. I survive because I must. Eliza thought of the Crimson Bell, of the women on the porch, painted smiles stretched thin over empty eyes. And she understood. Sometimes I wonder if surviving is worth what it costs. It is, Nayel said without hesitation. Every sunrise is a victory over those who want us erased. The conviction in his voice, hard, unyielding, lit a small, stubborn spark in Eliza Crowhurst's chest. She swallowed. The sheriff told me to be gone by morning. Then we leave. Nayel rose, the choice already settled. There's a trading post 3 days north. The man who runs it, Mateo Serrano, doesn't care about skin or history. Only fair trade. You could find work there. Muka Saramvir, Eliza stood as well, caught between relief and doubt. Why would you do this? Those men will follow you. Pride like theirs doesn't forget. I wounded more than their bodies, he said. You wouldn't reach the post alone. She started to protest, clinging to the last thread of independence she had left, but reason won out. I can't pay you. I didn't ask for payment. Nayel was already at the wagon, testing wheels and axles with practiced hands. We leave before dawn. Sleep now. Eliza settled into her bedroll and watched him take his place again, rifle resting across his knees. How strange, she thought, that the only true kindness she'd known in this hard country came from the man she'd been taught to fear. As sleep drew her under, Edith Crow's voice surfaced from memory. Worthless. Maybe by that world's measure she was. But out here, where survival itself was rebellion, worth was counted differently, in small mercies shared by those pushed aside. Perhaps the margins were the only places left where someone like her could breathe. Night transformed the desert. Where daylight was ruthless, moonlight softened everything into something almost unreal. Saguaros stood like ancient guardians, arms lifted toward the stars. A coyote's call drifted across the emptiness, lonely and aching. Eliza pulled her shawl tighter as they made camp near a cluster of ironwood. 3 days with Nayel had taught her new rhythms. Travel in the cool hours, rest when the sun ruled, read the land before it betrayed you. He taught without speeches. He pointed. There, he said, indicating a faint trail. Javelina passed this morning. Where they go, water follows. She learned the desert's quiet grammar. Barrel cacti leaning south, certain birds signaling water close by. The difference between dust lifted by wind and dust raised by riders. Watching him build a nearly smokeless fire from mesquite, she said, "You know this land like you were born to it." I was, Nayel replied simply. My grandmother taught me when I was small. He didn't finish the thought. Eliza didn't press. She'd learned that his silences carried wounds too deep for easy words. That night the cold fell hard. She woke shivering, her thin blanket no match for the desert's moods. She tried to stay quiet, unwilling to seem weak. But Nayel noticed. The desert tests everyone, he said, feeding the fire. It has no patience for pride. They sat close enough to share warmth, far enough to keep the careful distance they'd never named. In the firelight, Eliza studied his profile. Steady as stone, shaped by hardship, unbroken. May I ask you something? She said. He nodded, eyes on the flames. The sister you mentioned. What was her name? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, Ayana. It means eternal blossom. Memory weighted every syllable. She was 15 summers when the soldiers came to move us to the reservation. She ran. He stopped, the rest left unsaid. He stopped speaking, his jaw tightening, as if the words themselves cut too deep. Eliza Crowhurst waited, sensing that some memories demanded their own silence. They caught her near Tucson. Nayel went on at last. Said she was hostile. A girl who barely reached a soldier's shoulder. A short, bitter laugh escaped him. A rancher's wife found her afterward. Tried to help. But the damage was already done. Ayana died in that woman's barn, calling for our mother. I'm so sorry, Eliza whispered. The words felt useless the moment they left her mouth. The woman was Lucia Morales, Nayel said. She risked much to bring Ayana's body back to us for burial. My people wanted revenge. But I remembered her kindness. It made things complicated. Eliza understood. How did anyone reconcile mercy from one soul with cruelty from an entire people? How did you survive a world that demanded loyalty to one side when both had shown you their worst and their best? Morning brought no answers, only new trials. Their water supply ran low far sooner than expected. By afternoon, Gravel began to falter, his steps uneven, foam gathering at his mouth. "We need water soon," Nayel said, scanning the horizon, worry etched into his eyes. Eliza stroked the mule's neck, guilt weighing heavy. He had carried her this far. And now... "There," Nayel said, pointing to a stretch of land that looked no different from any other. "Cottonwoods. Maybe half a mile. It might as well have been 100. Gravel took 3 more steps and collapsed, sides heaving. "No. No, no," Eliza gasped, dropping to her knees. "Come on, boy, just a little farther." But Gravel had given everything he had. His breathing slowed, then stopped. Eliza pressed her face into his neck, tears burning hot against her skin. Just a mule, she told herself. Just an animal. But he had been her last tie to the life she'd lost, the only constant in a world that kept tearing itself apart. "Eliza," Nayel said softly, "we must move. Take what you can carry. Leave the rest." She looked at the wagon, at the few things she'd managed to keep. Her mother's china, Calder Roan's books, the quilt her grandmother had sewn. How did you decide which pieces of yourself to abandon? In the end, necessity chose for her. She took spare clothes, the medicine kit, Calder's pistol, and her grandmother's Bible. Not from faith exactly, but because its pages held pressed wedding flowers and a faded photograph of her parents. Nayel fashioned a pack from canvas and helped her load what they could. They left the rest beside Gravel, a quiet marker of one woman's fall from respectability into survival. The cottonwoods did shelter water after all. A small spring bubbling up from red stone. Eliza drank deeply, then sank into the shade, exhaustion and grief crashing over her. "I'm trapped," she said dully. "No wagon, no mule. I might as well have died back there with him." Nayel was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "When I was 12, soldiers burned our village. Homes, food stores, everything. Sacred things older than memory." He touched his chest. "My grandfather told me they can take all we own, but not who we are. We carry ourselves here." His fingers brushed his temple. "And here." "Pretty words," Eliza said bitterly, "but words don't change facts. I'm a burden to you now. You should leave me at the next town. Let me find my own end." Nayel turned to face her fully. "Is that what you truly think? That you are a burden?" "Aren't I?" she shot back. "You'd move twice as fast alone. You wouldn't have to worry." "I would worry," he interrupted, then fell silent, surprised by his own certainty. "You're not a burden," Nayel said, then paused, searching for words strong enough to hold the truth. "You are. Like ironwood." Eliza held her breath as he went on. "It grows slow in hard ground. Settlers cut it, burn it, try to clear it away because it's inconvenient. But ironwood endures. Its roots run deep, and when it blooms..." He nodded toward a nearby tree, its branches heavy with small purple flowers. "The desert turns beautiful." Something shifted inside Eliza. A thin crack split the wall she'd built around her heart. "I don't feel very enduring right now." Nayel almost smiled. "You lost your husband, your home, your family. You crossed dangerous land alone. You faced men who would have hurt you. You lost your wagon and your faithful animal. And still you sit here, deciding what comes next. She let out a shaky breath and managed a weak smile. When you say it that way, I sound almost heroic. Not almost. This time he did smile, and it changed his face. We rest today. Travel tonight. The trading post is closed now, on foot, 2 days maybe. That evening, as they prepared to move under cover of darkness, Eliza watched Nayel with new eyes. He moved through the quiet rituals of survival as if the land itself guided him, every motion calm and certain. Yet beneath that ease, she sensed the weight he carried, the loneliness of living between worlds. Nayel, she said softly. He turned, moonlight catching the sharp lines of his face. Thank you. For everything. I know I haven't said it properly. Gratitude isn't needed, he replied after a moment. Between friends. The words settled between them, simple and heavy all at once. As they walked through the cooling desert, following paths only Nayel could see, Eliza felt something she hadn't known in years. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it, as if she might be meant for more than survival alone. Above them, the stars turned, ancient and indifferent, while below, 2 outcasts moved through the night, no longer entirely alone. Dusk on the second day brought danger. The dust cloud rose first, long before the thunder of hooves reached them. Eliza's heart dropped when she saw the pale-eyed rider at the front. The same man Nayel had wounded days before. Rafe Henshaw had found them, and he hadn't come alone. 5 men rode hard, all armed, all wearing the look of hunters closing in. Into the rocks, Nayel ordered, urgency cutting through his voice. Now. They scrambled up a narrow break between red sandstone walls, Eliza's skirts tearing on thorns and stone. Behind them, shouts rang out, voices bouncing through the canyon. There. The Apache and his woman. The words twisted her gut, but there was no time to answer them. Nayel led her through a maze of stone, his knowledge of the land their only shield. They reached a high ledge just as the first shots cracked. Bullets shrieked off the rocks like angry hornets. Here. Nayel pressed Calderon's pistol into her hands. You remember how to use it? Eliza nodded, though her fingers trembled. Calder had taught her to shoot bottles and cans, never people. Stay low, Nayel said. Only fire if they climb. He was already moving, rifle tight in his grip, using the rocks for cover as he worked his way along the ridge to flank them. Time stretched and twisted. The bandits tried twice to climb up, but the narrow path betrayed them, turning their strength into weakness. Nayel's rifle spoke in steady bursts, the sharp cracks echoing off the stone and keeping the riders pinned below. Eliza Crowhurst fired once, when a head rose above the ledge. The pistol bucked hard, nearly throwing her backward. She had no idea if she'd hit him, but a curse rang out, and the man vanished from sight. As night settled in, the fight stalled into a tense deadlock. The bandits couldn't reach them, but Eliza and Nayel were trapped, water running low, ammunition counted by the handful. They'll wait us out, Eliza whispered, her throat raw with fear and thirst. No, Nayel replied quietly. They are impatient men, and this land at night. A grim smile touched his mouth. It tests courage. As if summoned by his words, a mountain lion screamed somewhere in the darkness, a sound like a woman in agony. Eliza's skin prickled. Below them, horses whinnied in terror, while men shouted curses, struggling for control. That cat's been trailing us since yesterday, Nayel murmured. 2 hours later, Clouds swallowed the moon, plunging the canyon into complete blackness. Nayel's hand closed briefly on Eliza's shoulder. We move now. Stay close. Don't speak. How he found a path in that darkness, she would never understand. They slipped down the far side of the rocks, each step deliberate, every breath measured. Eliza kept one hand on Nayel's back, trusting him utterly as they threaded through unseen dangers. They were almost at the canyon floor when disaster struck. Her foot landed on loose stone instead of solid ground. She went down hard, a sharp cry escaping as her ankle twisted beneath her. At once, gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes burst in the dark like deadly fireflies. Nayel dragged Eliza behind a boulder as bullets sparked off the rock. My ankle, she gasped. I can't. You can, he said, leaving no room for argument. You must. He hauled her arm over his shoulder, half carrying her as they lurched forward. Behind them, the bandits crashed through brush like enraged cattle, firing blindly at shadows. They reached a narrow crack in the rock, barely wide enough for one body. Nayel pushed Eliza inside and pressed in after her. The space forced them close. She could feel his heart pounding against her back, racing in time with her own. The riders passed within feet of their hiding place. Rafe Henshaw's voice carried clearly through the dark. Find them. That Apache knows I'll pay well for his scalp, and the woman. His laughter made Eliza press tighter against Nayel. She'll fetch a fine price in Mexico. They barely breathed as the voices faded. The storm that had been threatening finally broke. Rain fell in sheets, erasing tracks, but soaking them to the bone. Nayel leaned close to her ear. We need shelter. Can you walk? Eliza tested her ankle. Pain flared, but she could bear it. I'll manage. They crawled from the cleft like drowned animals. The rain turned the sandy wash into a rushing stream, lightning ripping the sky open in stark, terrifying flashes. Nayel found a shallow cave, little more than a rock overhang, but enough to blunt the storm. Eliza collapsed against the back wall, shivering uncontrollably. Her ankle throbbed, her clothes clung heavy and cold, and the weight of the night crashed down on her all at once. Nayel gathered what dry wood he could from beneath the overhang and coaxed a small fire to life. We risk them seeing the smoke, he said, but cold will kill us as surely as bullets. He guided Eliza closer to the flames, his touch careful and restrained as he examined her ankle. Twisted, not broken. It will heal. She watched him, noticing fresh lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. You're hurt, she said, spotting blood on his sleeve. A scratch from the rocks, he replied dismissively. When she insisted, she found a bullet graze along his forearm. They tended each other's wounds in silence, the closeness heavy with unspoken awareness. When they finished, they sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing the thin warmth of the fire. I've brought you nothing but trouble, Eliza said softly. No. Nayel stared into the flames. Those men would have hunted me regardless. I have history with them. Snake Eyes, Rafe Henshaw. His voice flattened. Last year, he and his men attacked a Mexican family heading for California. I was guiding them. I saved the parents, but their daughter, she was 14. What they did before I could stop them. Eliza closed her eyes, understanding settling like lead in her chest. So, this was never about me? It is now. Nayel turned to her, firelight flickering in his dark eyes. He knows I care what happens to you. That makes you a target. The truth hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Eliza's breath caught. You care. Instead of answering, Nayel reached out and brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. You smiled in your sleep last night, he said quietly. Just a small smile, like you were seeing something good. He fell silent, his hand dropping away. But Eliza Crowhurst caught it. Reminded you of what? She asked. Someone I knew long ago. Nayel squeezed her fingers once, then released them. We should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own trials. Sleep refused to come. Eliza lay listening to the rain, aware of Nayel's steady presence beside her. He had placed himself between her and the cave entrance, rifle within easy reach, guarding her even now. In the low glow of the dying fire, she studied the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair brushed his shoulder, the careful control in his posture, even as he slept. When had this dangerous, unfamiliar man become the one thing keeping her steady? Near dawn, fever claimed her. Cold and damp and fear overwhelmed what strength she had left. Eliza drifted in and out of awareness, heat and chill warring inside her. A voice hovered at the edge of reality, real or imagined, she couldn't tell. She dreamed of wildflowers, endless fields of them, purple and gold and white, stretching beneath a vast sky. Someone was bringing them to her, arms full of color in a land known only for cruelty. She tried to see his face, but the figure stayed just beyond reach, leaving only the flowers and a deep, unshakable sense of safety. You smiled in your sleep, a voice murmured gently, pulling her partway back. Was I bringing you wildflowers again? The tenderness in those words cut straight through her. She wanted to answer, to say yes, you were, you are. But the darkness closed over her once more. When Eliza woke fully, the sun hung low in the afternoon sky, slanting into the cave. Nayel sat beside her, dark shadows under his eyes, betraying a sleepless vigil. A cool, damp cloth rested on her forehead. Only then did she realize he'd been tending her fever. The riders? She asked, her voice rough. Gone for now, he said. The storm erased our trail. He helped her sit up, his touch careful, almost reverent. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by wild horses, she admitted, but alive. We protect each other, Nayel said simply. That is how one survives. Yet Eliza saw the truth in his eyes. It was no longer only survival. Somewhere between their first meeting and this moment, they had crossed an unseen line. The careful distance was gone, replaced by something deeper and far more dangerous than the men hunting them. Outside, the desert bloomed after the storm. Cactus flowers opened toward the sun, fragile and defiant. Beautiful. Treacherous, much like what was growing between them, something rare, born in impossible ground. Morning brought no peace. Eliza woke to Nayel's hand gripping her shoulder, his expression hard. Through the cave mouth, dust rose on the horizon. Riders, she breathed. They found us. Not found, Nayel said, already gathering what little they had. Tracked. Rafe Henshaw knows this country. He guessed we'd hide here. They had minutes, maybe less. Eliza tested her ankle. Pain flared, but it would hold. Outside, the truth was worse than she'd feared. The riders had split, closing in from two directions, cutting off escape. The wash, Nayel said urgently, pointing to the narrow ravine carved by the storm. If we reach the old mine shaft. Gunfire cut him off. Bullets sparked against stone as they ran. Eliza's ankle screamed with every step. The wash shielded them, its high banks offering cover, but it also forced them forward along a single path. There, someone shouted. Don't let them reach the mine. The abandoned shaft loomed ahead, a black mouth in the hillside promising shelter. 50 yards. 40. 30. A rider appeared above them, rifle raised. Time slowed. Eliza saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Nayel shoved her aside. The shot cracked. He grunted, stumbled, but kept moving, red spreading across his shirt. No. Eliza caught him, throwing his arm over her shoulder as they staggered the last few steps. The mine entrance yawned before them, timbers sagging, half collapsed. It was shelter. They plunged into darkness as more shots rang out behind them. How bad? Eliza asked, her voice shaking. Eliza strained to see Nayel's wound in the thin light leaking from the mine entrance. Keep moving, he gasped. Deeper. They felt their way along the tunnel, hands skimming rough stone as the air grew colder and stale. Behind them, voices echoed, sharp with excitement. They went into the mine, then go after them. Are you out of your mind? That shaft's been unstable for years. Eliza spotted a narrow side passage and pulled Nayel into it. They crouched in the dark, barely breathing. After several tense minutes of arguing, Rafe Henshaw's voice cut through. Flat, decisive. Fine. We wait. They'll have to come out eventually. Post men at both entrances. What if there isn't another exit? Then they die in there. Either way, problem solved. The voices faded. Eliza turned back to Nayel, working by touch alone. Her fingers found where the bullet had torn into his side. Blood flowed steadily, warm and slick. We need light, she muttered. No, he said. They'll see. You'll bleed to death in the dark, she snapped, fear sharpening her voice. I didn't come this far to lose you now. He went still. Lose me. Her hands paused. Even in the blackness, the weight of what she'd said pressed between them. We need to stop the bleeding, she said quickly. She tore strips from her petticoat and packed them hard against the wound. Nayel's breathing grew labored, every inhale costing him. There is another exit, he said at last. An old ventilation shaft, but it's difficult. Show me. They moved deeper into the mine, Nayel leaning heavily on her. The tunnels branched and twisted, a maze made worse by pain and pursuit. Finally, Nayel stopped. Up. Eliza's hands found iron rungs bolted into the wall, climbing straight into darkness. Can you climb? I must. She went first, testing each rung, heart pounding as she imagined the metal giving way. Below her, Nayel's breathing rasped, broken by the occasional grunt of pain. Once his grip slipped, only Eliza's quick reach kept him from falling. After what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, her head struck wood. She shoved, and a covering gave way. Daylight flooded in. They emerged onto a hillside, scattered with mine tailings, perhaps a quarter-mile from the main entrance. Nayel collapsed at once, his face ashen from pain and blood loss. Eliza scanned the ground below. She could see Henshaw's men watching the mine mouth. It was only a matter of time before they thought to search elsewhere. Can you walk? She asked. Nayel tried to rise, made it to his knees, then fell back. Go, he said. The trading post is northwest. 2 miles. Get help. I'm not leaving you. Eliza. No. The word came out fierce. You don't get to save me and then give up. We survived together. Remember? She spotted a cluster of boulders uphill that might give cover. Half dragging, half carrying him, she got Nayel behind the rocks. From there, they could watch the approaches while staying hidden. For the first time, Eliza examined his wound properly. The bullet had passed through. Good. But it had torn him badly on the way. She used the last of their water to clean it, packed it with cloth from her torn dress, and bound it tight. "Your dress is becoming quite short," Nayel murmured weakly, attempting a smile. "Hush." Still, a flicker of hope stirred. If he could joke, maybe. The sun climbed higher, baking the hillside. Eliza counted the men below, 7 in sight, which meant at least one more was likely circling, searching for exactly what they'd done. "Eliza," Nayel said urgently. "In my pack, the small leather pouch." She found it. Inside was a bundle of dried plants, sharp-smelling and medicinal. "Chew this," he said. "Make a paste, for the wound." He guided her hands, steady despite the pain. "Apache medicine," Nayel murmured. "It will draw out the poison." As Eliza Crowhurst worked the crushed leaves into a paste, he spoke in a low, wandering voice. He told her of his childhood. Learning to read tracks before he could walk with certainty, the first time he'd seen soldiers riding across the plain. Their blue coats looked like pieces of sky fallen to earth. He whispered, "I thought they were spirits. How else could men capture the sky?" Eliza understood then. He was giving her his stories because he feared there might not be time later. "Save your strength," she said softly. "You can tell me everything when this is over." "You still believe there will be an after?" He met her eyes. "Yes." A shout from below shattered the moment. One of Rafe Henshaw's men pointed up the slope. They'd been seen. "The pistol," Nayel said. "How many shots?" Eliza checked. 3. "Not enough." He struggled to sit. "Help me to the ridge. We make our stand there. You can barely stay upright." "Then I'll shoot lying down," he said, jaw set. "I won't let them take you." The certainty in his voice cracked something open in her. "Why?" she asked. "Why does it matter so much what happens to me?" Nayel lifted a hand and brushed her cheek. "Because you smiled in your sleep. Because you saw me as a man, not Apache, not half-breed. Just a man. Because in all this darkness, you are light." Tears threatened, but there was no time. "They're coming," he said. "Help me move." They reached the ridge as the first riders appeared below. Eliza braced Nayel against a rock. He raised the rifle, hands shaking. "When I start firing, you run," he said. "North, to the trading post." "I told you," Eliza replied, pressing the pistol into his hand. "I'm not leaving." A breath passed between them. "Then we make these bullets count." The men climbed on foot now. Horses left below, 6 of them, hungry and armed. Eliza grabbed stones. Useless, but better than nothing. "You should know," she said quietly. "You made me smile too. Even in sleep. Even in the dark, you brought me wildflowers when I thought beauty had left the world." Nayel's fingers found hers and squeezed once. Then it was worth it. All of it. The first man crested the rocks. The world erupted. Nayel's shot struck him square in the chest. Eliza hurled a stone with all her strength, catching another man in the face and sending him tumbling back with a curse. But there were too many. As Nayel fired again, Eliza saw Henshaw slipping around their flank, pale eyes cold and patient. "Behind us!" she shouted. Too late. Henshaw's rifle cracked. Nayel jerked, red spreading across his chest. The rifle slipped from his hands. "No." Eliza caught him as he collapsed. "No, no." Henshaw approached slowly, savoring it. "Well now, the Apache finally falls. His gaze slid to Eliza. "And you, Mrs. Witt?" "Yes, I know who you are." I asked around. "Heard you were too good for honest work." Eliza held Nayel, feeling his blood soak into her dress. His eyes found hers, still present, still fighting. Henshaw's smile widened. "Seems to me a woman who'd take up with a savage might be open to other arrangements. Come along, Willing, and maybe I'll even get him to a doctor." Eliza looked at his smirk, at the men closing in, at Nayel bleeding in her arms. Something wild rose in her chest. Cold, fierce resolve. Her hand found the dropped pistol. "One bullet left," Eliza Crowhurst said. She lifted the pistol, her voice steady as bedrock. "Go to hell." The shot landed true, clean and final, striking Rafe Henshaw square between those pale, merciless eyes. He toppled backward, the smugness wiped from his face at last. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then everything broke loose. The remaining men shouted and raised their guns, only to be met by fresh rifle fire cracking from the ridge above. Riders surged over the rise, Mexican traders by the look of them, shooting fast and sure. Henshaw's men scattered like startled quail, suddenly outmatched. "Señora, señor," a familiar voice called. Mateo Serrano, the trading post owner Nayel had spoken of, stood with his rifle still smoking. "We heard the shots, Dios mío." Nayel. What followed blurred into motion and noise. Strong hands lifted Nayel. Rapid Spanish filled the air. Eliza refused to let go of him, even as they carried him to safety. Someone pressed water to her lips. Someone else bent over Nayel, examining his wounds, their expression grave. "Please," Eliza begged. "Please save him. He's everything." The last thing she remembered was Nayel's eyes finding hers. His lips moved. No sound came, but she knew the words. "Wildflowers. You were bringing me wildflowers." Then darkness closed in on them both. The town of Cedar Falls shimmered into view 2 weeks later, like a mirage at the end of Pain and Dust. Eliza sat beside Nayel on the wagon seat, keenly aware of the stares that followed them down Main Street. A white woman traveling with an Apache, she might as well have announced scandal aloud. Nayel's wounds had healed enough for travel, though he still moved with care. The Mexican traders had saved their lives, but Eliza knew the harder trial lay ahead. They needed supplies, work, a place to truly rest. Cedar Falls was the only town within 50 miles. "We don't have to stay," Nayel said quietly, sensing her tension. "Yes, we do," Eliza replied, chin lifted despite the whispers swirling like dust devils. "You need medical supplies I can't get at a trading post. And I need work if we're going to survive." They stopped at Sylvan Crow's general store. The proprietor, a thin man with wary eyes, watched them approach as though they were venomous. "Help you?" His tone suggested he'd rather not. "Medical supplies," Eliza said firmly. "Carbolic acid, clean bandages, laudanum for pain." Sylvan's gaze slid to Nayel, taking in his features, the guarded strength in his stance despite injury. "We don't serve Indians here." "Then serve me," Eliza said. "I have money." "Do you now?" A woman stepped out from behind the counter. Martha Crow, her face tight with disapproval. "And where does a woman traveling with a savage get money?" Eliza felt Nayel tense beside her and placed a calming hand on his arm. "From honest work, which is what I'm seeking here. Now, will you sell me supplies, or shall I take my business elsewhere?" The threat was thin. There was no elsewhere. But money had its pull. Business was business. Sylvan's expression softened just enough. As Eliza finished her purchases, she sensed movement outside. When they stepped back onto the street, half the town had gathered. Among them stood a woman dressed in severe black. Prudence Holloway, the minister's wife and self-appointed keeper of Cedar Falls morality. "You," Prudence said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "You're the widow from Bisbee? We've heard about you." Eliza's stomach tightened. News traveled fast out here. "Taking up with an Apache," Prudence sneered. "Have you no shame? No concern for your immortal soul?" "I think of it constantly," Eliza answered evenly. "Which is why I choose kindness over cruelty, friendship over fear." "Friendship?" Prudence laughed sharply. "Is that what you call it? And your husband's memory? Your family's good name?" "My husband is dead," Eliza said, surprised by her own calm. "His family cast me out. And as for my name, I would rather be shamed for choosing compassion than respected for choosing hate." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces hardened. Others quietly showed sympathy. Voices overlapped, sharp with judgment. "The church is no place for Indian lovers," Prudence Holloway declared. "Nor is any respectable establishment. You'll find no welcome here." "Then I'll make my own," Eliza Crowhurst shot back. She turned to leave, only for a man to step into her path. He was younger, well-fed, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Now hold on," he said, false warmth coating every word. "No need for such temper. I'm Theodore Blackwood, proprietor of the Silver Dollar Saloon. I might have work for a woman with your flexibility." The meaning landed hard. A few men laughed. "She said she's looking for honest work," Nayel said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken. Blackwood's expression cooled. "I wasn't talking to you, Indian." "But you were talking about her." Nayel stepped forward despite Eliza's hand on his arm. "Show respect." "Or what?" Blackwood's fingers drifted toward his gun. "You'll scalp me?" The crowd pressed in, tension thickening. Eliza's mind raced. One spark and this would turn ugly. "Mr. Blackwood," she said loudly, cutting through it. "I appreciate the offer, but I have standards. I don't work for men who insult my friends or threaten wounded people." "Wounded?" someone scoffed. "He looks healthy enough to cause trouble." "He was shot defending me from bandits," Eliza said clearly. "The same bandits who've been terrorizing travelers for months. Rafe Henshaw and his gang. You've heard the name." That stilled them. Henshaw's reputation carried weight. "You're saying this Apache killed Henshaw?" Sheriff Nolan Pryor pushed through the crowd, his badge catching the light. "I killed him," Eliza answered evenly. "Put a bullet between his eyes when he tried to take me to Mexico. Nayel here had already been shot twice protecting me." Silence fell. Faces turned toward her. This small woman speaking so plainly of killing one of the territory's most wanted men. "That's a serious claim," Pryor said at last. "Check with Mateo Serrano's trading post," Eliza replied. "His men saw the fight. They helped drive off the rest of the Red Spur riders. They'll confirm it." The sheriff studied them both, then nodded. "I will. In the meantime." He turned to the crowd. "Seems to me anyone who rid us of Henshaw deserves thanks, not harassment. Christian charity, at the very least." "They do deserve charity," a new voice said. Eliza turned to see a young woman in a plain gray dress stepping forward. "I'm Hester Blythe. I run the boarding house on 2nd Street. I have a room if you need it." Prudence rounded on her. Hester, you would harbor these people? I would, Hester replied calmly. People in need, as our Lord taught us. The Apache can sleep in the stable, someone muttered. He stays with me, Eliza said firmly. We're partners. Where I go, he goes. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Even Hester hesitated. Perhaps, Nayel began. No. Eliza turned to him. I'm done with their conditions, their divisions. We stand together, or not at all. Something changed in Nayel's eyes. Surprise, respect, and something deeper. He nodded once. I'm sorry, Hester said quietly. The other boarders would leave. I understand, Eliza said. They turned away until another voice called out. Wait. An elderly Mexican woman stepped forward, apron dusted with soap and steam clinging to her clothes. Marisol Alvarez, who ran the laundry at the edge of town where respectable folk rarely went. I have a room above my shop, she said in accented English. Not fancy, but clean, and I need help with the washing. Eliza's eyes burned. Senora, Bah! Marisol waved her off. I know what it is to be outsider. Come, we talk terms. As they followed Marisol Alvarez, the crowd parted with reluctance. Eliza heard the murmurs rise again behind them. Shameful. Living in sin. What do you expect from a barren woman? That Apache will murder them all in their sleep. But there were other whispers too, quieter, uncertain. She killed Rafe Henshaw herself. Maybe we judged too fast. Takes courage. That night, in the small but spotless room above the laundry, Eliza and Nayel sat by the narrow window, watching Cedar Falls settle into dusk. All day they had kept a careful distance, aware of eyes that followed every step. Now, alone, the space between them felt heavy with things unsaid. You didn't have to do that, Nayel said at last. Stand with me so openly. Yes, I did. Eliza turned toward him. I'm tired of a world where caring for someone is disgrace if they're the wrong color, where kindness is treated like sin and cruelty like virtue. You'll lose everything, he warned. They already speak your name with contempt. Eliza laughed, a short sound that surprised them both. What everything? I've already lost what that world values. My husband, my home, my family's approval. I'm a barren widow with no prospects. By their measure, I was ruined long before I met you. You are not ruined, Nayel said fiercely. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. Then why do you keep trying to step away to protect my reputation? Eliza crossed the room, then stopped. What reputation? The only good thing I've had these past weeks is you. Your friendship, your protection, your... She broke off, unable to name it. Eliza. He was close now. Near enough that she felt his warmth, though he did not touch her. In my world, this is complicated too. Some would say I betray my blood by caring for a white woman. Then both our worlds are foolish, she said quietly. Yes, he agreed, but we still must live among fools. They stood together, watching stars prick the darkening sky. After a while, Nayel spoke again. Hester meant well. Tomorrow you could accept her offer? Create distance from me. In time, they might accept you. Eliza turned and placed her fingers gently over his lips. No more noble sacrifices. No more pushing me away from what is mine to choose. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what partners do. Nayel caught her hand, pressing it to his cheek. Partners, he said. the word heavy with meaning. Partners, Eliza echoed. And in that quiet room above a laundry on the edge of town, two outcasts chose each other over the approval of a world that had already cast them aside. Outside, Cedar Falls slept uneasily, full of righteous judgment and whispered scandal. Inside, they had found something worth more than respectability. They had found home, in each other. The road ahead would not be gentle. There would be other towns, other stares, other moments where safety would demand silence and truth would demand courage. But tonight, they had shelter. They had work. And most of all, they had each other. That, Eliza thought as the stars wheeled slowly overhead, was worth every whisper in the world. Morning came like any other in Cedar Falls. Eliza worked beside Marisol Alvarez, steam rising from wash tubs, soap biting at her hands. Nayel hauled deliveries and lifted loads others pretended not to see. The townsfolk still watched with narrowed eyes, but 6 weeks had passed. And though acceptance never came, they had carved out a narrow space where life was possible. Then the thunder of hooves tore through the calm. "They're back," someone shouted from Main Street. "Henshaw's men, back for revenge." Eliza's blood turned to ice. She had always known this day would arrive. Killing Rafe, Henshaw had severed the head of the serpent, but the body still twisted, dangerous and vengeful. Now the remnants of his gang had come to claim blood. Through the laundry window she counted them. 8 riders, bandanas pulled high, pistols already loose in their hands. They moved with intent, reins snapping, boots hitting dirt as they angled straight toward the wash house. "They know where we are," Nayel said, his voice flat as stone, fingers closing around his rifle. "Back door," Marisol Alvarez urged, fear tightening her accent. "Go. I tell them you already left." Too late. The lead rider dismounted, a man Eliza recognized at once. Cole Maddox, Henshaw's lieutenant. His grin was thin and mean. "Eliza Crowhurst." His voice rang down the street. "You and that Apache owe us dearly. Come out nice and easy, or we start burning buildings." "No," Eliza said, calm, surprising even herself. "No more running. No more innocent people hurt because of us." She stepped toward the door. Nayel caught her arm. "Together," he said simply. They walked out into the open street, sunlight harsh on their faces. Nayel held his rifle low but ready. Doors slammed shut. Curtains twitched. The town watched from hiding. "Well now," Maddox drawled. "The widow and her pet savage. You cost us a leader, woman. Time to square accounts." "Your leader was filth," Eliza said clearly. "And you're no better, threatening people who had nothing to do with him." "Innocent?" Maddox sneered. "In a town that shelters killers?" A new voice cut in. "The only killers I see are the ones bringing trouble to my streets." Sheriff Nolan Pryor stepped out from the jail, shotgun resting in his hands. Hope flickered, then faltered. Maddox laughed. 8 of us. One of you, Sheriff. You really dying for an Apache lover and a disgraced widow?" Pryor hesitated. Eliza saw the weight of the decision bend him. Law was one thing, martyrdom was another. "I'll make it easy," Maddox said. "Hand them over, we ride away. Refuse, and Cedar Falls burns." Silence stretched tight as wire. The town's judgment pressed in, heavy and suffocating. "You want us?" Nayel said, stepping forward. "Then take us. Leave the town out of it." "No." Eliza moved with him. "You don't bargain for me." Maddox's grin widened. "I'll bargain how I please. Boys, take them both." The shot cracked from above. Marisol Alvarez stood in her window, braced behind an old cavalry carbine. Maddox's hat flew as the bullet tore past his head. He dove for cover, cursing. One of the riders swung his pistol toward her window. Nayel fired first. The man dropped. Eliza drew Calder-Roan's pistol from beneath her skirt. She never left it behind now, and fired again. The street erupted. Gunfire thundered from all sides. Not just the gang. Doors burst open. Hester Blythe appeared with a scattergun. Bram Calder fired from behind his anvil. Even those who had whispered and judged now defended their town. Eliza and Nayel dove behind a water trough as bullets screamed past, wood splintering under fire. "The stable!" Nayel shouted. "Better cover!" They ran. Eliza's skirts tangled. Nayel turned to fire as they moved. A bullet slammed into his shoulder, spinning him hard. He stayed upright, but blood spread fast. "No." Eliza was under his arm in an instant, dragging him toward the stable doors. They burst inside, darkness swallowing them. "How bad?" she asked, already tearing at his shirt. "I've had worse," he said, though his face had gone gray. Outside, the battle roared on. Sheriff Pryor's voice cut through the chaos, calling for surrender as more townspeople joined the fight. It seemed the town had reached a decision. Whatever their doubts about Eliza and Nayel, they would not be ruled by outlaws. "We have to help them," someone shouted outside. Nayel tried to push himself upright. "We must hold them." "No," Eliza said sharply, forcing him back down. "We need to keep you from bleeding out." She packed his wound with shaking hands. The bullet had gone clean through, but blood soaked his shirt faster than she liked. The stable doors burst open. Cole Maddox staggered inside, blood streaming from a gash on his scalp, eyes burning with rage. "Found you." Eliza's pistol was empty. Maddox lifted his gun, sighting on Nayel. Eliza didn't think. She moved. She threw herself between the barrel and Nayel's body. The shot was deafening. Pain tore through her, white and absolute. She felt herself falling, felt Nayel catch her as a raw, animal sound ripped from his chest. Through blurring vision, she saw Maddox step closer, triumph already forming. Then his chest bloomed red. He looked down in shock before collapsing face first into the dirt. Behind him stood Hester Blythe, scattergun smoking, her face pale but unflinching. "Get the doctor," Hester screamed. "Someone get Dr. Amos Bell." Eliza tried to speak, to say she was all right, but only blood came out. She felt it spreading beneath her, warm and terrifyingly fast. Niall's face hovered above hers, broken with fear. "No," he whispered. "No, you can't. Eliza, please." She wanted to soothe him, to say it didn't hurt, though it did terribly. Her hand found his cheek, traced the familiar line of his jaw. So many words unsaid, so much time wasted on fear and caution. "Wildflowers," she murmured, forcing a smile. "You were right about the wildflowers." "Don't talk," Nayel begged, pressing his hands to her wound. "Save your strength. The doctor's coming." The world narrowed to his face, tears cutting pale tracks through dust on his skin. The gunfire outside had faded. Voices shouted, boots ran, but none of it mattered. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, "for showing me I could bloom, even in the desert." "You are not dying," he said fiercely. "I won't let you. We have plans. Remember? The cabin by the stream, the life we're going to build." She wanted to answer. Darkness crept in anyway, soft at first, then heavy. She had always thought death would be frightening. It wasn't. Not with Nayel holding her, whispering words in Apache she did not understand, but felt deep in her bones. Dr. Amos Bell arrived, pushing people aside. Eliza caught fragments. Serious. Lost a lot of blood. Not hopeless. The words floated, distant. Fight, Nayel commanded, his voice breaking. Fight for us, for the future we deserve. And because he asked, because she had found something worth living for in this harsh land, Eliza fought. She clung to awareness as they carried her to the doctor's office, as steady hands worked to mend what had been torn, as the town that once shunned her now waited and prayed. The last thing she saw before the laudanum dragged her under was Nayel's face, set with fierce determination. The last thing she heard was his promise. I'll be here when you wake. Always. Time lost its shape. Eliza drifted between darkness and dreams, between pain and peace. Sometimes she heard voices. Marisol Alvarez praying in Spanish, Hester reading softly from the Bible, Nayel singing under his breath in Apache. Once, she thought she heard Prudence Holloway, her voice thick with tears, speaking of being wrong, of courage wearing many faces. In her dreams, Eliza walked through endless fields of wildflowers with Nayel. Purple, gold, white. Color bursting from barren earth. He held her hand, and she knew, with dream certainty, that this was their future. Not easy, not without thorns, but achingly beautiful. When Eliza finally woke for real, sunset filled the doctor's office with gold and red light. Nayel sat beside her bed, his own shoulder bandaged, looking worn, but fully awake. Water, she croaked. He was on his feet instantly, lifting the cup, supporting her with infinite care. Easy, he said softly. Dorsarka Dronas, Amos Bell says you must keep still, Nayel told her softly. The bullet did damage, but nothing that won't mend with time and care. He paused, his expression tightening. The gang is gone, those who lived scattered, and the town. His voice warmed. The town fought for us, Eliza. Even people who once spoke against us. When Cole Maddox threatened to burn everything, they remembered we're part of Cedar Falls now. Whether they like it or not, Eliza absorbed that slowly, the words settling like medicine. And now, Nayel said, taking her hand with care around the bandages. You heal, and we decide what comes next. Together, she said, then winced, preferably with fewer bullets involved. He gave a faint smile. No promises. Trouble seems to follow you like bees to blossoms. Speaking of blossoms, Eliza murmured, squeezing his hand weakly. Was I really bringing you wildflowers in my sleep back then? His gaze softened. No. But in my dreams, you were. Every night since I met you. Fields of them, impossibly beautiful in a hard land. Like you. Despite the pain, the uncertainty, the long road of recovery ahead, hope stirred in her chest. They had faced the worst and lived. Whatever came next, they would meet it the same way. I love you, Eliza said simply, too tired and too grateful to be alive for restraint. I should have said it sooner. Hush, Nayel whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. We have time now, all the time we need. Outside, Cedar Falls rebuilt and reconsidered. Learning, perhaps, that judgment and righteousness were not the same. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds held hands and watched the stars come out. No longer outcasts, but partners in the truest sense. And somewhere in the desert, wildflowers bloomed in places that should have been barren. Proof that beauty could grow anywhere love was brave enough to take root. 6 months passed after the shootout, that nearly took Eliza's life. The scar along her side still ached when storms rolled in. She learned to read it the way the desert read the sky, as a sign of change coming, not always unwelcome. She stood now at the edge of their land, 5 acres along Willow Creek that Nayel had bought with gold from a claim he'd kept quiet for years. The cabin was small but sturdy, raised by his hands and her resolve. Around it, against all sense, a garden thrived. Corn and beans planted the Apache way, mingled with the hardy vegetables she had coaxed from stubborn soil. "You're thinking too hard again," Nayel said, coming up from the creek where he'd been watering the horses. His shoulders still troubled him on cold mornings, but like her, he carried his scars without complaint. "I'm just amazed," Eliza said. 6 months ago I was bleeding out on a stable floor. Now look at us. Now look at us," he echoed, sliding his arms around her waist. They stood together as the sun painted the mountains rose and gold. Healing had taken time, not only of flesh, but of spirit. Some nights Eliza woke gasping, feeling phantom blood on her hands. Some days Nayel felt quiet, wrestling old ghosts, but they healed as they lived now, together. The town changed too. The fight forced Cedar Falls to look at itself, to ask whether prejudice was worth dying for. Some hearts stayed shut. Prudence Holloway still crossed the street to avoid them. But others opened in ways Eliza hadn't expected. Hester Blythe came often now, bringing borrowed books and tidings from town. Sheriff Nolan Pryor tipped his hat with real respect when Eliza and Nayel rode in for supplies. Even a few of the miners had begun hiring Nayel as a guide, finally admitting that knowledge of the land mattered more than old prejudice. "The letter came while you were in the garden," Nayel said one afternoon, drawing an envelope from his pocket. Eliza knew the handwriting at once. Isla Roane, the only member of her late husband's family who had ever shown her gentleness. Her fingers shook as she opened it. "Dear Eliza," she read aloud. "Word has reached us of your circumstances. Mother is, of course, scandalized. But I wanted you to know that I understand. Love arrives in forms we never expect. Calder would want you happy. And if you ever come east, you will have welcome in my home. Your sister in spirit, if not in law, Isla." Eliza pressed the letter to her chest, blinking hard. After years of being cast aside, even this small kindness felt enormous. "Would you go?" Nayel asked quietly. "Go." Eliza turned fully toward him. "Leave this, leave you. She offers what you cannot. Respectability," he said softly. "A return to your world." Eliza cupped his face in both hands. "My world is wherever you stand. When will you believe that?" He caught her wrists, holding them against his chest so she could feel his steady heart. "The world will always make this hard for us." "Then the world is blind," Eliza said fiercely, "because I have never seen more clearly than when I look at you." Hoofbeats cut the moment short. Eliza tensed as a rider came hard up the path, old fears flaring. But it was Bram Calder, grinning like a boy. "Nayel, Mrs. Crowhurst," he called, reining in. "Wanted to be the first to tell you." He swung down, dust swirling. "Town council met last night. They're offering you the deputy sheriff position, Nayel. Pryor says he needs someone who knows the territory, speaks Apache and Spanish. Says you're the best man he's got." Eliza felt Nayel stiffen beside her. A badge, a lawful place, acceptance they had never expected. "They know what I am," Nayel said slowly. "They know who you are," Bram corrected. "Man who protected the town, Man who keeps his word. Pryor says any fool can see character counts more than color. After Bram rode off with Nayel's promise to think on it, they climbed the low rise overlooking the valley. Wildflowers covered the slope, as if the desert had hoarded all its beauty for this single place. "Deputy Sheriff Nayel," Eliza said, testing the sound. "It suits you." "It would mean staying," he said. "No more wandering. No leaving when things turn hard." "Things are always hard," Eliza replied. "At least here we have friends, support, a chance to build something lasting." "A home," Nayel said. "We already have that," she corrected, threading her fingers through his. "What we'd be building now is a future." They sat among the flowers, planning. If Nayel took the post, they could add onto the cabin. Maybe another room for... Eliza stopped herself. Nayel noticed at once. "What is it?" "Nothing. Foolish thoughts. Tell me." She sighed. "Doctor, Amos Bell says the shooting, the damage. It's unlikely I'll ever have children." She forced a brittle smile. "Another way I fail at being a woman, I suppose." Nayel was silent for a long time. "My people believe family is more than blood," Nayel said at last. "It is choice, commitment, a shared purpose." He rested his forehead against hers. "You and I, we are family, complete as we are." "But you would want..." Eliza began. "I want you," he cut in gently. "Whole, alive, joyful. If children come, they will be welcomed. If they do not, then we are enough." He smiled faintly. "More than enough." Eliza leaned into him, watching the sun sink behind their land, the sky burning amber and rose. "When did you become so wise?" "When a stubborn white woman refused to let me die in peace," he replied, a trace of humor in his voice. "She insisted we both live instead." Eliza laughed softly. "The most inconvenient thing I've ever done." "And the best," Nayel said. As the first stars appeared, they walked back to the cabin. Tomorrow, Nayel would accept the deputy position. There would be resistance. Those who bristled at an Apache wearing a badge, those who still whispered about their bond. But they would meet it the way they always had. Together. Inside, Eliza lit the lamps while Nayel fed the fire. Ordinary tasks, made sacred by the simple fact that they were alive to do them. He turned suddenly. "Eliza, that first night, when you asked why I helped you," she remembered. "You said someone helped your sister." "That was true," he said, "but not the whole truth." He faced her fully. "When I saw you, alone, terrified, yet still fighting, I recognized something. A strength that would not break, only bend until it found a new shape." He gestured toward the window where moonlight touched the rocks. Like wildflowers growing from stone, impossible, yet there. "And now?" Eliza asked softly. "Now I know I was right," he said. "You bloomed, Eliza, in the harshest ground." He paused. "We bloomed." She crossed the room and took his hands. "Neither of us would have survived alone." "No," he agreed, drawing her close. "We needed each other. We still do." Outside, a coyote lifted its voice to the moon. Once that sound had frightened Eliza. Now it felt like belonging. The desert night wrapped around their cabin, vast, unforgiving, beautiful. "You know what I realized," Eliza murmured against his chest. "You were wrong that night in the cave." "Oh?" he said. "You said I smiled in my sleep, wife, and asked if you were bringing me wildflowers again." She pulled back to meet his eyes. But you had it backward. I wasn't receiving them. I was bringing them to you. She smiled. Every dream, every quiet joy. I was gathering beauty, saving it for when we would meet. His eyes shone. Eliza, we were always meant to find each other, she continued. Two people pushed to the margins, written off by the world. But margins are where wildflowers grow best, at the edges, in forgotten places, wherever there is just enough hope for roots to take hold. He kissed her then, and it tasted like promise. Like tomorrow. Like 1,000 small rebellions against a world that said they should not exist. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. So, what now, Mrs. Crowhurst? Nayel asked lightly. Now, Deputy Nayel, Eliza replied. We live, boldly, honestly, without apology. She looked out at the dark sweep of desert. We make this land bloom with so much love that even the stones will have to admit beauty can grow anywhere. Especially, Nayel said, in the harshest ground. They stood together in the doorway, gazing into the star-filled vastness. No longer afraid, no longer alone. Ready to build a future where wildflowers had already begun to grow. Tomorrow held endless possibilities. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over safety, truth over acceptance, and each other over everything else. In the garden, defying both nature and reason, wildflowers continued to bloom. They stood as quiet proof that some things were stronger than the forces bent on crushing them. That love, like desert flowers, could survive and even thrive in the most unlikely ground. The desert lifted its night song around them. Wind threading through canyon walls, an owl calling from the dark, the soft rustle of small lives following ancient paths. Eliza and Nayel added their own music, low laughter, whispered plans, the steady breathing of two souls finally at rest. They had traveled far to reach this moment. Through violence and prejudice, through fear, both their own and the world's. The journey had reshaped them, forging something sturdier and more beautiful than either could have become alone. Morning would bring new trials, but tonight held peace. Tonight held love. And the unshakable certainty that whatever came, they would meet it as they had learned to meet everything. Hand in hand, heart to heart, they stood rooted deep in the wild, impossible ground they had chosen. The wildflowers nodded in the night breeze as if in quiet agreement. Eliza smiled in her sleep, carrying armfuls of color through her dreams, bringing Nayel flowers again and again. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths. Some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.